the LaxFactor podcast.
Finally, Duke has it. It is McGuire, and McGuire buries it. Aiden McGuire comes up with the huge ground ball off the face-off and takes it down to the other end and puts it in and puts Duke on top to end this one.
What is up, college lacrosse fans? You're watching the LaxFactor podcast. I am your host, Ted Hoos. This is episode number 298, and today we're going to dive right in and we're going to talk about 3 one-goal games that I watched, and we're going to talk about a bunch of games beyond that. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not and you're watching or listening anywhere else, just share the podcast with people, and always go to LaxFactor.com, get yourself a t-shirt, hat, swag, whatever you want to get from there. We are going to dive into first talking about Duke and Richmond. It was defensive midfielder Aiden McGuire that ended up with the ball on the opening faceoff of OT, booked it upfield. He wasn't stopped, as you already saw here in that highlight. He buried the game winner for Duke. I wanted to show multiple angles of this. I wanted to show TV replays, but I knew that would be the replay that got the entire podcast flagged, and I wanted to talk about that play first above all. So here you go. You had your Instagram highlight, and I'll probably do that a lot more where I know that highlight's going to flag the episode and I'll get no revenue or anything of that sort. Now, Duke was able to pull out the win despite losing in pretty much every statistical category other than saves, and I'm actually wrong. They lost in 2 very key statistical categories, but Richmond won the face-off battle 19-8 thanks to Jared Chenoy's 19 of 27 day. Richmond outshot Duke. They put more shots on cage than Duke. They cleared the ball perfectly. Duke didn't. They did end up having 3 more turnovers than Duke. I think it was 15-12 in favor of Duke, 4-2 in favor of Duke. Richmond had 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter as Duke came back, forced overtime, and then won the game here. And then in cage here, Patrick Jamison was seeing the ball a little bit better than Richmond's Zach Vicue. Jamison stopped 14 shots on the day. 12 goals against, but 14 shots. Your team wins in the second overtime is what it was. So incredible job out of Jamison there. Max Slope paced all scorers for Duke. 3 goals, 2 helpers. Eric Maliver was good for a goal and 3 helpers. Graham Blake, I believe Graham Blake's now strung 2 good games together in a row for Duke. If we look at Blake here specifically, 3 good games together here for Graham Blake. 2-0 against Air Force, 2-1 against Providence, now 4 goals here against Richmond. So the Harvard transfer, right? Yeah, Harvard transfer is playing well for Duke here, and that's what they needed. They needed some guys to step up and score goals if McAdory wasn't going to be the guy, and a guy like Graham Blake now over the last 3 games playing well is going to be huge for them. I'm a big fan here, and he only had 4 shots or 5 shots, 4 goals off 4 or 5 shots here. Actually, it's right here. I can look. 4 goals off 5 shots. Very efficient game for him. Duke, they're now 8-1. This may be their best victory so far, which isn't usually the case. Duke, I think, has fallen a little bit victim to some of the teams that were on their schedule this year. Over the last couple of years, last few years have traditionally been stronger. So that strength of schedule for Duke doesn't look like what it used to. Win over Jacksonville was okay. Well, it wasn't as good as it had been in the past because Jacksonville had already gotten waxed by Syracuse. St. Joseph's is down a little bit. I like the win over Michigan, and they played Princeton tough. Win over Penn. Penn's been really tough here, and Penn has played well out of conference in the previous seasons, and this one just didn't look as good now that Penn is closer to 500. So you see here they haven't been tested, but Richmond is a ranked opponent, and Richmond's played a tougher schedule than Duke, with Richmond's losses coming to Maryland, Cornell, and now Duke. They have a win over Virginia. They took Cornell right down to the wire, 12-11 here, and then they got to beat up Mercyhurst and UMBC in between. And it doesn't get any easier for Richmond. Richmond's going to play Georgetown here next before they get into what we would call the easy portion of their schedule, where they finish the season with St. Bonaventure, Hobart, High Point, UMass, and St. Joseph's. Now, I like their chances of running the table on that conference schedule throughout, and that's going to put them in a good place to, a good place. I don't think anyone is going to get an at-large bid out of the Atlantic 10, so I still think that Richmond's going to have to win their conference to get in, simply because I think losing their conference to someone would be bad enough that some of the quality wins they have aren't going to count as much as some of the losses that they might have if they end up not running the train on their conference schedule and then winning their tournament here. But yeah, good win for Duke though. Credit Duke, credit Aiden McGuire, best D mid in college lacrosse, I think overall, especially in terms of being a two-way midfielder. You've got others that are in the conversation, but McGuire's as good as any of them here. And once again, if you look at the stat here for McAdory, 1 assist, 2 shots. Now, this isn't because he didn't get the ball. I saw early. I didn't watch this late, and I kind of came back to it as it was in the first overtime because I was flicking between games and watching Princeton Cornell. But it wasn't because he didn't initiate. He didn't carry the rock. He did, but it's still just beyond me why he's not a bigger cog in the wheel here of this Duke offense. But hey, once again, I say screw me. I know Max Sloat was getting some time at attack. That looked good. And that seems to have helped him, at least in terms of his dodging. I don't know if that was the case in this game. Like I said, I didn't watch this one closely enough. I just kind of went through and watched tape, watched highlights, but mostly I was just ripping between offense and defense here as I was going through. All right, so let's stop talking about that one. The next one we got to talk about here is Delaware Towson. Now, this is going to be Mikey Weiser's game winner that you're watching that helps book Towson's victory over Delaware, their second win this season. Weiser and Conan Fitzpatrick each netted 6 goals for Towson. Brendan Powers put up 7 goals and 2 helpers for Delaware in the loss. Obviously, we're going to have some big guys with big numbers in a 19-8 game like this. Both goalies saw a ton of shots and ended up on the better side of 500 in terms of their save percentages, with Kevin Ellington making 17 saves to 19 goals against. So actually, that isn't 50%. Neither goalie was 50%. I looked at these wrong. I am a moron. But either way, both goalies made a bunch of saves out of necessity in this one, with Luke Downs making 15 saves. He picks up the W. That was going to be a big point of my thing here, talking. One of the factors in the win, besides Weiser having the biggest balls of them all, was that Towson made the most of their extra man opportunities. They went 3 of 4. Delaware had 4 opportunities as well. They only go 1 of 4, but Towson ends up booking their second win, as we said.
Under pressure, there is shot and another score for Bucknell.
Bucknell and Colgate. Now, what you just saw was Bucknell's Connor Davis scoring the game winner against Colgate with 4:01 remaining in the game. Luke Renaud made a huge save with 49 seconds left on the clock, got a piece of the shot, ball's trickling towards the end line, the goal line. He stops it, picks it up before it could cross. Now, maybe it wouldn't have crossed. It was trickling towards the goal line, but it was on the goal line, just never made it across. But credit him, though, for making that huge stop. He made another save with no time left on the clock. It was credited as a save in terms of the box score, but I'd posit if it had gone in, they'd have wiped it out because it appeared that the time on the clock had already expired. I think I even heard the horn before he let it go. This game, though, was pretty crazy because it went back and forth. Bucknell jumped out to an 8-3 lead, which didn't surprise me. Colgate won their game, I think it was last weekend, and they were down quite a bit early. Colgate battles back. They end up taking a 13-9 lead after going on a 10-1 run after going down by 5. So they come back. They have a 13-9 lead early in the third. Bucknell ends up battling back, evens it up. Over the course of the fourth quarter, they just went toe-to-toe, goal for goal, up to the point that we see the game winner that Davis scored there. Another game where we saw dudes put up serious points because, once again, they scored a buttload of goals. Michael Meyer put up 5 goals and 3 assists for Bucknell. Teammate Connor Davis was good for 3 goals and 4 helpers, including that game winner that you saw there. Rory Connor for Colgate went 6 and 5 on the day. Kid did everything he could to keep his team in it, but they fell short in the end. Now, the best part about Renaud's game and I'm never sure how to pronounce it. I know I've had to say this kid's name for a couple of years now, but the best part of his game-saving save, is that how I would say that, was he only played in the second half here. Him and, what is his name, Jazz Zanelli? Is it Jazz or Jax? I don't want to call him Jazz if it's not. It is Jazz. All right, so it's Jazz Zanelli and Renaud have been splitting time here. so far this season. So whereas Zanelli was getting, having a rough go, as you would say, over the course of the first half, the Bucknell defense played much better in the second half, gave up fewer shots over the course of that second half, allowing Renaud to probably get into a little bit more of a rhythm. He didn't get tested a lot, though. 4 shots, four saves to just 3 goals against in his 30 minutes of action, but he had the 2 credited saves here towards the end. So that was interesting. Lacombe got shredded a little bit, 17 goals against to just 8 saves. Not great for him overall. Then we have the game that took place in Ithaca that I probably should have gone to, but once again, I just like staying at home watching a bunch of games at once here. Princeton and Cornell. The key stat for Cornell was not their own. It was that Princeton's Coulter Mackesy only scored 2 goals off 10 shots. Mackesy took 10 shots on a day that the Princeton offense all told only took 35 shots. We got a game here where the Cornell defense and the Cornell offense both show up. They both play through the entire game. They used that kind of combined might to control the game from the outset and route to that 15-10 win over a very tough Ivy League rival in Princeton. Wade Tucker tied the score at 2 each with 8:02 left in the first quarter, but that was the final moment of happiness that Princeton would experience. It only lasted about 6 seconds before C.J. Kirst turned around, scored in transition off the ensuing faceoff. Michael Long would put Cornell up 4-2 a little over a minute later, and then Cornell would just slow roll that separation to their eventual 5-goal victory. Kirst was his usual self, just an absolute animal. 5 goals, 2 helpers, while Willem Firth was good for 2 goals and 2 assists on the day. Now, to be clear, I feel like this was a big win defensively for Cornell. Princeton's offense has been very tough to stop. Coulter Mackesy has been a killer against everybody. Played high-volume shooter. But if you can get those days where you can be on his hands enough that he's going to miss some shots. He put 7 of his 10 shots on cage. Nust got the better of him, 5 of those 7, with him only putting up 2 goals. No helpers in the game here. So, what are you going to do? You hold their best player back a little bit. The other role players aren't able to kind of, take advantage of the extra attention he's getting. You end up losing to a league rival, conference rival that you would wanted. I mean, Princeton wanted this game on the road. It would have been like stealing a game. And I thought that Cornell was kind of maybe susceptible to losing this one, but not so. Face-offs were also neck and neck going into that final stanza, but Cornell won 5 of 6 over the fourth quarter. So that also contributed to keeping things easy and breezy for Cornell down the stretch, as we see Cascadon wins 13 of 23 on the day. But Andrew McMeekin, who struggled at times, 10 of 22, 6 GBs, 45%. I think he did what you would have expected him to do and at least keep pace with Cascadon and company, to the point that they didn't have a huge possession disparity overall. Goalkeeping, not terrible. Wyatt Nust here, 12 saves to the 10 goals against. Ryan Croddick, who's been good for Princeton so far this year, 14 saves to 15 goals against, including that final goal. Or not that final. I was going to say that final goal in overtime, like this one went into overtime. I'm an idiot, and my brain's broken. We're going to move on to the next one I want to talk about here. Johns Hopkins and Navy. I watched the first half of this one. Navy held a lead or kept pace through about halfway through that third quarter. Evan Conway scored unassisted on a nice dodge into the middle of the field to get things tied up at 7s. Less than a minute later, Russell Melendez would find Matt Collison out top. Collison busted a nasty swim move on his defender, beat Daly high, a little bit of a twister action in there. That gave Hopkins the lead. Eric Schick did the same thing, but on the other side of the field, a little high-to-high twister out of him as well. That put Hopkins up by 2, and they never relinquished that. Charlie Eiler and Schick played a 2-man game at X. That resulted in Eiler being all alone on the crease. He dunks it. Just a little pick slip action. Easy goal for the eventual game winner for Hopkins. That was the goal that put them up 10 to 7 at that point, and they win 12-9 by the end. Eiler ended up pacing all scores. He had 2 goals, 2 helpers. Collison was 2-1. Brooks English was 2-1. Hunter Chauvette scored 3 goals, and Hopkins showed solid depth in scoring through their entire offense. Logan Callahan was an absolute animal on the day. He wins 20 of 24 draws with 15 ground balls. So that, you figure, once again, we see face-off guys dominate and their teams don't win. But, you figure that factored heavily in this win here. Navy's real saving grace overall was, while they didn't take a ton of shots, they were efficient in putting the shots they took on cage. But enter Oren Galinis. I don't even know how to pronounce this. I never heard his name called in the telecast. He gets to start for Hopkins. He makes 14 saves in his first stop for Hopkins in this win against Navy. at Navy Marine Corps Stadium. I believe that's what it's called, isn't it? Navy had trouble clearing the ball. Late, Hopkins started pulling away, and Navy failed on 3 of 6 opportunities, I think, over the course of that fourth quarter. That hurt them because they'd only failed on 2 clears, I think, in the prior 3 quarters. They failed on 3 over the course of the fourth, as Hopkins was able to pull away. Evan Conway led Navy. What'd he have here? Evan Conway had 3 goals and a dish for Navy in the loss. Next one, Maryland and Virginia. Now, the difference in this game ended up being the Maryland midfielders. Both the first and second lines dominated matchups over the first, 9 minutes of the game. Bryce Ford got things started with a goal off of a dodge. Then it's Elijah Stobaugh on the second midfield line. He rips a perfectly placed shot, gives Maryland a 2-zip lead, and he got that second midfield in the scoring column here. Matthew Keegan was up next. He dodges from X, wraps around the crease, sneaks one past Nunes. That made it 3-zip. The midfield dominance would continue out of Maryland with Stobaugh and Keegan both scoring the next 2 goals of the game. By the end of that run, Maryland's up 5-zip. And despite Virginia getting back into it, they got back to within 5-4. There was a couple of moments where they got back to within 2 goals, but the outcome was what was never really in question, even where Virginia started to threaten. Now, for Maryland, it was balance and depth that helped the Terps take down UVA. As we look at the scoring here, where am I? Keegan and Stobaugh, they each finished the game with those first 2 goals. They didn't score again. Bryce Ford went for 2 goals and a dish off that first midline. Urksa and Spanos both put up 2 goals as well. So everybody showed up here for these guys. And then they had a bunch of role players do crap beyond that. Logan, for Virginia, nobody put up more than a single point in this entire game. We see here from the usual suspects, Menke, a goal, Erdman, a goal, not one of the usual suspects. Colsey, Schutz, and Sunderland, all a goal. McCabe Millen, no goals, 1 assist off 7 shots. And that has been one of Virginia's problems, is being able to get everybody involved, being able to find someone that can win one-on-one matchups, draw slides, get their teammates open. Virginia just has not figured that out offensively. I don't think defensively they've been all that bad, actually. I mean, you give up 12 goals to Maryland on a day that your offense only scores 6. I don't think that's terrible. Logan McNaney continued his insane season. He had 13 saves to just 6 goals against, but 6 of those saves for McNaney came over the course of that first quarter, as the Maryland offense did a good job scoring goals and being efficient on their side of the field. McNaney did a great job in terms of making sure Virginia stayed off of the scoreboard long enough to give the Terps that breathing room that they needed to slow roll this into a 6-goal victory. Both teams put up the exact same number of shots on cage, 19-19, but McNaney was the better goalie. He's seeing the ball better. He's the All-American. He's the guy that people are talking about maybe winning the Tewaaraton. I don't think that's going to happen. If the Tewaaraton wasn't given to a goalie last year, considering what Notre Dame did, I do not see that happening this year with McNaney either. And last year was the perfect chance for them to give the Tewaaraton to a goalie, and they didn't take it. So I don't see that happening. I think also credit to Tiffany for not pulling Nunes. Nunes had a rough day. I think he didn't make a save over the course of the first 4 or 5 shots. But it wasn't his fault. They even talked about in the telecast how they were watching the bench to see if Morris was going to come in. I did not see him warm up. Nunes got the full game, and I think he deserved to. I don't think those first 5 goals especially were his fault. If you watched the highlights that I rolled, I mean, you could see time in room with hands free. Keegan scored wrapping around. I mean, these were, shots that were tough to save. There was an argument that maybe one of them he could have saved, but even that was still a dude shooting from 7 yards out. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be easy to get handcuffed in those situations. So I didn't put that on Nunes at all. Maryland has Michigan up next. Virginia will take on UAlbany. Notre Dame and Michigan. Now, this one is over by the half. Chris Kavanaugh, Jake Taylor, Devin McClain, all these dudes showed up and did damage early. Kavanaugh had 3 goals and a dish by halftime, finishes the game 4-3. Angrick, Maharas, McClain, Taylor, they all put up 2 goals behind him. Will Donovan had 3 caused turnovers, 2 GBs. Thomas Ricciardelli made 10 saves to just 6 goals against. Michigan had a generally bad day thanks to that Notre Dame defense. Will Lynch just ripped people up, 13-16 at the faceoff dot with 13 ground balls. Does that imply that he won every faceoff in essence himself? I'm sure not, but anytime you see that stat out of a faceoff guy, 13 wins, 13 ground balls, you won 81% on the day. Hell of a job by Will Lynch. That's all we're going to say about this one. Outside of Notre Dame has Duke next, and Michigan has Maryland next. So both teams have a solid test upcoming. Yale, Harvard. Harvard jumps out to a 6-zip lead, and this was another one of those games where it was never really in question, despite Yale coming back and making it interesting by the end of the game, mostly thanks to that second quarter where they outscored Harvard 6-3. Teddy Malone feasted early, scoring 2 goals and 2 assists over Harvard's 7-goal first quarter. Sam King had 3 goals over that same stretch. Harvard was up 7-2 after that first 15 minutes. Leo Johnson and Chris Lyons kind of both showed up here. They Johnson had 3 goals. Lyons had 4 goals here. Overall, they paced Yale in scoring, which is a good sign for Yale. The problem, just once again, is that Yale's just allergic to playing defense. And when your offense isn't clicking, like the Yale offense has been clicking over the course of the last what seems like a decade, but I'm sure it's probably only back to like 2019 or so. It's just going to be tough to pick up W's in the Ivy, where most of these teams are putting it together on both sides of the field between Penn. Even Dartmouth is playing solid lacrosse overall. What impresses me the most about this Harvard team, they continue to win games despite getting absolutely dusted at the faceoff dot. Machado Rodriguez goes 19 of 27 with 10 GBs at the dot. They just, Harvard just keeps losing draws, but their defense continues to get stops, continues to put the ball in the hands of an offense that's scoring goals at very, what would you say, efficient ways. They've just been efficient, and you got a guy like Sam King that you can thank for that overall, but still, credit Harvard for just not ever winning the possession battle, but they've been winning more often than not games. They're sitting here at 5-1 with wins right now over Syracuse, Michigan, and now Yale. So, not the greatest, and they do have that loss to Colgate, but Colgate, quality team, just happened to lose to Bucknell. It happens here. Sam King, he scored 5 of the goals here for Harvard. Teddy Malone, as I said, 2 and 3. Jack Speedo was 2 and 2. Excellent outing for the Harvard offense overall. Penn and Brown. It was Griffin Skane's man-up goal with 5:06 left in the game that gave Penn a 2-goal lead, and that acted as the eventual game winner as well, as they win 9-8 over Brown. Marcus Wertheim here, 4-1 for Brown on the day, so he had a big day. Goalie action, we had Emmett Carroll making 15 saves to 8 goals against, and his team wins the game. Emmett Carroll, excellent goaltender. He was actually my first team All-American in terms of the preseason voting and all of that good stuff. Dash Sachs wins 15-21 at the dot, so that helps Brown stay, within shooting distance here, or whatever you'd call it at Penn. Penn has St. Joseph's next before they get into the rest of the Ivy League schedule. Then they finish with Notre Dame. So St. Joseph's in a non-conference matchup here in just 2 days. And then they have Dartmouth, Cornell, Yale up after that. Harvard, Princeton, Notre Dame. That's just a brutal way to finish your schedule because I don't think there's an easy game to be had in the Ivy this year for any of these guys, because even teams like Dartmouth are playing pretty tough. Marquette, they win in overtime thanks to Bobby O'Grady's goal dished by Will Foster. That gives Marquette the OT win over Utah. Foster finished 2-3. Matt Caputo, 4-1 for Marquette. Chase Robertson was very good for Utah. He's 3-1 on the day. What did we get out of goalies here? Colin Lenskold had a good day for Utah, 17 saves to 12 goals against, but Lucas Lawis also played well for Marquette, 16 saves, 11 goals against, and they notched the win thanks to that game winner by O'Grady. All right, let's shut up about this one. We had another overtime game here. Hofstra and Stony Brook. John Madsen scored on a dish from Anthony Melissa. I don't know how to pronounce that dude's name. Giving Hofstra a win in the second overtime over Stony Brook here. What do we have? No big crazy scoring. No crazy goalie play. I just wanted to talk about it because I love games that go into overtime, and I feel like I don't talk about guys who score game-winning goals here. So credit to John Madsen for scoring the game winner. Was that his only goal of the game? It was not. He had 2 on the day. And Anthony Malika, the guy who assisted the game winner, he was 3-1 on the day in that one. And I mean, in all here, there were some other games, but nothing crazy. Bryant actually did take Albany by a goal. Quinnipiac beat Marist by a goal. St. Joseph's this was probably the worst game in terms of top matchups overall. I'm just trying to make sure there isn't a game that I missed that I did want to talk about. Boston U, I expected them to beat Loyola. They did that. Army. Did we not talk about Army? maybe I didn't write that one up. Army took it to Lehigh here. Jackson Iker 6-1, Gunnar Fellows 2-1, Hill Plunkett 2-1. I was wrong. I said that the big four, Iker, Fellows, Plunkett, and Fournier, would all have 3 goals, and they did not. Fournier only had an assist on the day, so. But either way, Army wins. And, Army, they get the number 3 ranking by virtue of the fact they're undefeated right now, but I'm not overly impressed with who they've played. I think Boston U presents an interesting matchup, both as a rival and historically. I think they're a good team as well, but I don't think they're much better than a Lehigh or anything like that. In fact, I think Boston U may have lost to, they didn't lose to Lehigh, not yet anyway. So, yeah, but I just don't feel like Army's been tested, and I've seen a lot of Twitter posts chirping Army and their strength of schedule thus far. Boston U, they can get a win there, end up 8-0. Hey, they're going to stay at number 3, but it's the North Carolina game here I think is going to be their big test. And you look, they have a what I would call just about a cupcake schedule. It wouldn't traditionally be that way, but teams like Loyola that are traditionally tough aren't as tough. I don't think Lehigh or Boston U are as tough as they've been in the past. Yale is not as tough as they've been in the past. Same with Rutgers. So I think that UMass win looks like a good one for them. I like the Lehigh win, but really it's just who have they beat thus far. I'm just not overly impressed. And, that might be a jerk thing to say. Who knows? Oh, we got today, though, probably by about the time you're watching this, because I'm running a little late today, we have number 10 Ohio State against number 20 Denver, and then Carolina plays against Jacksonville at home. Both those games are at 2 o'clock. So, hey, thank you. This is it. That's today's episode, man. What did I do? 27 minutes or so. Come back on Tuesday. We'll do the D3 roundup where we're going to talk about every game that was part of the Mustang Classic with full highlights and everything. So it's going to be a huge show come Tuesday. Thursday, we'll do the preview show and all that crap here. And, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. Go to LaxFactor.com. Get yourself a t-shirt to support us. And that is all. Hoost is out. The LaxFactor Podcast.